Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining Neural Project's Urgent Conversations all about the judges. We are so glad to have you here for this important discussion. Tonight, we're focusing on the role of the judiciary in North Carolina and why it matters to each of us, especially as we approach this year's midterm elections. In North Carolina, voters elect judges at every level, from district court all the way up to the North Carolina Supreme Court. These are critical decisions that shape how laws are interpreted, how justice is delivered, and how our Constitution and rights are protected. It is important that we take time to research candidates and elect individuals who will uphold and defend the Constitution, not those who place special interests above the people. Tonight's conversation is about equipping you with the knowledge you need to stay informed, engaged, and empowered as voters and community members. If you are not already a follower of New World Project, we ask that you follow us on our social platforms. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also visit us on the web at www.newworldproject.org. I am Carolyn Sumter, a native of Robeson County. I love Red Springs and mayor-elect for my hometown. Proud mother of two and chairwoman of our Robeson County Municipal Board. But most importantly, I am the fearless leader of our program and policy department. I'm a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated and Las Amigas Incorporated, the Red Springs chapter. I'm a champion of Red Springs area schools and all things rural. At New World Project, we believe real voices matter. Through our Urgent Conversation series, we bring community members together to learn, share, and take action. Our goal is simple: to make sure every voice is heard, every barrier is addressed, and every community has the power to shape its future. New World Project is proud to be on the ground with community engagement and organizing efforts deeply rooted in Union, Anson, Richmond, Scotland, Moore, Hoke, and Robeson counties. These are our focus counties. And April is a very special month. Happy birthday to New Real Project. And we are celebrating all month long. Who am I kidding? We're celebrating all of 2026. We're celebrating 5 years of advancing justice in rural communities. We are thriving on year 5. In this slide, we're just going to highlight a little bit about judges. So when to vote for judges in North Carolina. November the 3rd, 2026, judge seats on the ballot. We have one vacant seat open for reelection, North Carolina Supreme Court Justice seat, 3 seats on the North Carolina Court of Appeals. There are several Superior Court judges seats and District Court judges seats that will be on the ballot this fall. Judicial voting details and term limits. All right, so in-person early voting will begin October 15th and run through Saturday, October 31st. So if you are unable to vote on election day, vote early. Right now, the term limits are 8 years for our justice seats, 8 years on the Court of Appeals, 8 years for your Superior Court judges, but your District Court judges in your areas only serve a 4-year term. And now that I've given just a brief overview of what we'll talk about tonight, it is my honor to introduce tonight's moderator, Cynthia Wallace. Although she resides in Mecklenburg County, she still rules. Cynthia is our co-founder and executive director of our nonprofit. Tonight, we are fortunate to have a leader who not only understands the issues facing our communities, but who has dedicated her career to ensuring those communities have a voice. Please join me in welcoming our moderator, our leader, Cynthia Wallace.
Thank you so much, Caroline, for that great overview of our organization, our mission, and tonight's purpose. And I always also like to shout out the folks from New Rural Project that are here. We have several team members here, many that are in their green polos. So if you have your camera off, just wave to everyone so they can see this amazing team. So we are so excited, as Caroline mentioned, to celebrate a huge milestone, our fifth birthday. That was 1 week ago today on April 6th. It's hard to believe that the organization I co-founded with Helen Probst Mills just 5 months after she ran for North Carolina Senate District 25 and I ran for the 9th Congressional District has turned 5 years old, y'all. We're out of preschool, we're in kindergarten. What started in 2021 as an idea with daily meetings and no staff has grown into a thriving organization with an incredible 9 member team and countless volunteers working to impact thousands of lives across rural South Central and Southeastern North Carolina. So, you're not only going to be listening to me talk and our wonderful panelists, but we also want you to participate. If you follow North Carolina politics, you know these races are close. So we're going to do a little pop quiz. So Eric has pulled up our first question. So if you could in the chat, drop your answer to this first question. What was the margin between the two candidates in the 2020 North Carolina Supreme Court Chief Justice race? So we'll give you a couple minutes. We didn't have our Jeopardy music, but we'll give you a few seconds, not a couple minutes. All right, we see one vote, one answer from Ms. Tamika. Ruby gave us one. Gail, okay. All right, we give you all about 10 more seconds. All right. All right, don't be shy. All right. So, okay, let's see if there we go. We had two winners there, Ms. Christina Davis McCoy, our New Rural Project board member and treasurer, and Mr. Maurice Holland from Moore County. That was 401 votes, y'all, out of 5 million cast. All right, Eric, let's pull up question number 2. Uh-oh, we went fast, but hopefully you didn't see it. So what was the margin in 2024, just 2 years ago, for another North Carolina Supreme Court justice seat? All right, Nancy and John. Ruby gave us another number. All right, I'll give you 10 more seconds. All right. And drum roll, please. Eric, why don't you drop that number? It was 734 votes. That was also out of over 5 million votes cast. So, as you can see, both of these judicial races were decided by fewer than 1,000 votes out of 5 million. In both of those races, there was 1 to 2% fewer votes cast than the governor's race. That's between 50,000 and 110,000 fewer people weighing in. So think about that. 50,000 and 100,000 people didn't vote for our Supreme Court races, and these two races were decided by less than 1,000 votes. So if that doesn't show you that every vote counts, I don't know what does. But that kind of drop off also shows how critically important it is for people to understand how judges' decisions affect their daily lives. And that's one of the key takeaways we hope you'll leave with tonight. So if you've been following us for these 5 years, you'll know that all of our programs have the word conversations in their titles. And that's what we want to have tonight, an engaging, thoughtful conversation. So we're going to begin by having our distinguished panelists introduce themselves. I'll ask them a few questions and then it'll be your turn. So start thinking of those questions and you can drop your questions in the chat anytime and we'll have someone keeping an eye on it. So first, I am so honored to allow our Justice Anita Earls to introduce herself in a couple of minutes. Just ecstatic that she was able to, in her busy schedule, make some time for little old New Rule Project. Justice Earls.
Well, thank you all so much. I'm actually just incredibly grateful to you for giving me this opportunity. Um, we are we are having oral arguments this week, so it's a busy week for the court. But I want you all to know that I am trying to get to every corner of the state, and so having this opportunity to talk with folks from around the state and especially with the kind of work that the New Rural Project is doing, I'm just thrilled to be here. And so to introduce myself, for those of you who don't know me, before joining the court in 2018, I was a civil rights attorney for 30 years in North Carolina. And that means I represented people whose rights were being violated in all sorts of different types of cases. In fact, you name a part of the state, and I'll tell you what kind of case I had there. But a lot of them were voting rights. And of course, voting rights is near and dear to my heart. And I understand the incredible challenge that we are facing in 2026. And I'm thrilled that all of you are on this call because, among other things, in addition to giving you a sense of what our court does, I hope to enlist you in helping to protect our democracy.
Thank you so much, Justice Earls, and look forward to even hearing more from you throughout this evening. And so, Eric, we could go to our next screen. So we would love for former Judge Carolyn Thompson, who ended her service on the Court of Appeals, but served on multiple other courts, to introduce herself. And as she starts, one of the things I found so interesting, and I don't know if we'll get to this question, but Judge Thompson, you and Judge Powers have a lot in common in your schools. Both Howard and what was your other school? You have two
Hampton.
schools in common.
Well, I attended the original HU. She may have gone to Howard University, the other
I'm
HU.
sorry, Hampton. I'm sorry. I'm that's on me. You'll
But
forgive
it's
me, I hope, for saying the wrong HU.
Yeah.
it's all good. It's still HBCU, so we're all good. And plus, we're sorority sisters and members of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. So honored to serve and be a part of this wonderful discussion tonight. I am Carolyn Thompson, and as she mentioned, I'm a former Court of Appeals judge, former Superior Court judge, former District Court judge. In February, I celebrated 30 years in the legal profession, and I can tell you that it has been an honor and a pleasure to serve in this capacity, in this role, emphasizing the need to protect our courts going into this next election to help Justice Earls retain her seat, a much needed seat. And so I'm welcoming this conversation tonight from the view of having served on every court except the Supreme Court, and looking forward to the questions.
Thank you so much. And we will also bring to the virtual stage, I know she was having some technical difficulties, but I believe Judge Powers is with us.
I am. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be among these illustrious panelists, my fellow Hamptonian and sorority sister, and of course, Justice Earls. I look forward to the discourse, to the questions, hoping to move our country forward. You know, we've got so many things to accomplish in our democracy, but of course, you know, the courts are, you know, that standard that you have to lift whenever things are going to the lift.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Judge Powers. So we will start with our first question, and all of you will have the same question. And it really is a major goal of ours for tonight is to connect the role of a judge or someone in the judiciary with their day-to-day lives, because people are so concerned about that. So can you help us understand what a judge in your area actually does on a day-to-day basis and how that work affects our day-to-day lives beyond the courtroom? So we'll start with Judge Thompson. You're on mute, Judge.
Yep, that would help. I think when I served as a district court judge, it was really evident that it impacted the community. And being a part of a small town, Granville County, which was connected to four other small counties, the Vance, Franklin, Warren, and now Person County areas, it became very clear to me when you try to shop in Walmart how you are impacting the community. Folks that are right there in your backyard, your front step, or in your church community, you're making decisions that impact them directly. For example, I served as when I was on a district court judge seat, we had to do juvenile court. And so oftentimes the kids who are actually going to school with my kids, if they were coming into juvenile court, that's hands-on and impacting with a stroke of a pen, a generational move right there in the community. The district court level is what I call the kitchen sink court. We heard criminal, juvenile, domestic violence, disputes right there in the community. So it's very important to make sure you know who your district court judges are on a daily basis. And so that's my perspective from the district court level.
All right. And do you have anything to add on the Court of Appeals from that perspective, how that might impact folks?
Well,
Because
as
you
I
have such a
explained,
wide breadth of experiences.
well, when I was on a Court of Appeals and running to keep the seat, it was very apparent to me that people were not informed about the power of the Court of Appeals, the workhorse of the appellate system. And you tell somebody about the Court of Appeals and like, what? Court of what? And what does that mean? And so I spent a lot of time trying to educate the importance of the error correcting power of the Court of Appeals. If you didn't get it right in district court or superior court, the most powerful words you can say were, I appeal. And so that would take it up to the different layer of lenses, if you will, from a panel of three to determine the outcome of what you said went wrong in the lower courts, to say the district court level. So having the honor of serving on the Court of Appeals, writing some opinions that impacted the entire state, that was an honor to try to explain to folks the weight of the Court of Appeals. So.
All right, thank you so much. And I will I want to leave Justice Earls, obviously not for the end, but we want to go to Judge Powers. Can you tell us a little bit about your work on the Superior Court and how does that impact folks' lives?
The Superior Court is a trial court, so it has an immediate impact on the lives of course, the people who are the defendants and who are the victims, but it also impacts our community as far as safety, and it impacts their families. So just like today, I had a young man who had several charges. He got a good plea offer, but he was going to prison today, and he is en route as we speak. So he really wanted to get probation. He was eligible for probation, but because of the plea and the number of cases that he had, that was not the deal. So it absolutely affects him and his employer, and where he'll be whenever he gets out of prison, because sometimes people don't think about that. When people go to prison, they come back. So what is reentry going to look like? How is he going to be able to get a job to pay fees and fines and things of that nature? But also when you're at the trial court and you're looking at the everyday impact, because when I go in, and it's according to what kind of cases I'm going to hear. In the Superior Court, we hear criminal cases and we hear civil cases. So I was working on some motions a couple of months ago dealing with the House and HOA, the mechanism by which the different developments are governed. And when the homeowners association makes a rule, then all the people are impacted in that community. But then when they come together and decide we're going to undo a rule, Then you have to look at the legislation and the things that would really impact that development, what they can develop there, what they can have there, what can be forbidden. And so those things, have implications on the civil side. When we make rulings, and as Judge Thompson said, you're there in the heat of the battle, trying the cases, hearing the evidence, and then you make a decision. So when somebody has an objection, if you overrule that objection and allow a piece of information to come in, then when it gets appealed, then the Court of Appeals makes a determination as to whether or not it was done correctly, or whether the right law was applied. So once that happens, then those things become case law, and that case law is followed by the rest of North Carolina, and potentially other districts as well, if they use that as persuasive law. So the Superior Court has an immediate impact on the community, from crime to civil matters.
Awesome. So we're already starting to see how these courts intersect, right? And so I'd love to, I had the honor of hearing Justice Earls speak a little bit just yesterday. So I know you spoke so eloquently about the role of the Supreme Court and how it impacts all of us. So I'd love for you to take this question, Justice Earls.
Sure. Well, so part of the reason why I wanted to be on the court is because I understand that our state constitution is a very robust source of protection of our individual rights. And so even though our court only hears, last year we only heard oral arguments in 80 cases, which is not a lot. We've heard many more, or other years the docket has been larger, but it is the role of the Chief Justice to decide our calendar. That's one of the powers of the Chief Justice. So I as one of two people in the minority, Democratic minority, I have very little power to control any of those kinds of issues. But what I can tell you is that last year we heard about 80 cases. And so the cases that we hear, so we hear appeals, sometimes directly from the business court. We hear direct appeals if it's a capital murder case. Otherwise, the cases are supposed to go through the Court of Appeals. So we are reviewing a decision that a three-judge panel in the Court of Appeals has already made. The legislature, in its wisdom, dramatically changed what our court does when they decided to end the right of appeal based on a dissent. So what is that? The Court of Appeals was created in 1967, and the way it was, the way the legislature established it included. So that was established when the Constitution was rewritten. And if there was a dissent, if you lose your case at the trial level, you automatically have, and you think there's an error of law, you can't appeal if they just got the facts wrong. And sometimes it's hard to tell, is this a factual issue or a legal issue? But in theory, the trial courts are supposed to decide the facts. But if you think that the trial judge applied the law wrongly, maybe they allowed some evidence to be introduced that shouldn't have been legally, or maybe they excluded evidence that you had that should have been admitted, then you automatically have the right to ask the Court of Appeals to consider your case. If they do that and two judges rule against you, but one dissents and would have ruled for you, then in the past, you had the automatic right, you didn't have to, but you had the right to appeal to our court. We hear cases, all 7 of us together. So it takes 4 votes on our court to win a case with us. And that was changed by the General Assembly in 2024, I believe I'm right. So that now we have to agree that your case is a matter of public importance, that it's a matter of first impression. So maybe it's a legal issue that we've never decided. And believe it or not, there's actually a lot of legal issues that the North Carolina Supreme Court hasn't decided. We are hearing oral arguments this week, and in at least one of the cases, it's a completely novel issue. We haven't decided it before. Or if there's a strong argument that the Court of Appeals ruled in a way that conflicts with our prior cases, those are the 3 criteria that we're supposed to use to decide whether or not to hear a case. But to get to the basics of how what we do impacts people's lives, we're the court of last resort when it comes to the state constitution. So there are many issues that involve both state and federal rights. So Justice Riggs' contest with Judge Griffin is an example of that. That she was asserting her right to vote, or she was saying that people's right to vote under the state constitution was being abridged by Judge Griffin's effort to throw out 82,000 ballots. But there was also in federal court a case saying you have the right to vote under the federal constitution. So when she lost in state court, because four members of my court ordered that the ballots of overseas and military voters be thrown out, a federal court looked at that order and said, wait a minute, that violates due process and equal protection. And so when that happened, Judge Griffin conceded and Justice Riggs took her seat. But that's an example of a controversy where there are both state and federal rights at issue. But let's take education. There is no federal right to education in the federal constitution, not directly. There's some arguments about due process or liberty interest, but generally, the reason why the Leandro litigation, which started when Hoke County and four other rural counties sued the state to say that the way that the education funding process was happening was not fair to their counties, and that the children in their counties did not have access to a sound basic education that is guaranteed in the state constitution. That case came to our court multiple times. And when our court ruled a little over a week ago that the plaintiffs did not fairly allege that this was a facial challenge. I can explain that, but it was a technicality. The majority opinion, the first sentence of the majority opinion said, "We at issue today, or what is before us today, is a question of subject matter jurisdiction," and by that they meant that the plaintiffs didn't put the right language in their complaint to invoke the court's power to do anything about statewide funding. I know the media has talked about the case very differently, but that's the basis of the ruling. So in that case, there's no ability to go to federal court. So in multiple types of cases, our court is the last resort, and we're deciding things like how much you pay for electricity, because we decide whether or not Duke Power can pass on to consumers the cost of cleaning up coal ash. We review all of when asked to, review all the decisions of the Utilities Commission. We decide issues that impact whether or not workers injured on the job will be fairly compensated, whether people who are uninsured and go to emergency room, if they're charged more than insured patients. We recently had a case about whether or not they could sue in a class action. So when we decide those issues, it affects everyone in the state. So even though people aren't coming to our court, they're not sitting there with a lawyer representing them arguing a case, the issues in the cases that we decide impact voting rights, landlord-tenant housing rights, family law. We decide questions about alimony and child custody, termination of parental rights, consumer disputes, business disputes. It's really easier to say what we don't do. So we don't do bankruptcy, we don't do immigration. But pretty much everything else, it potentially can come to our court, and it has a huge impact on the economy of this state, a huge impact on businesses, on people's lives.
So, as someone who has lived in the same house for 20 years, and in January saw some of the largest utility bills that I've ever had in 20 years, I see how decisions that hit the Supreme Court impacts our pocketbooks, our kitchen table issues. And so that's one of the reasons why this is so important. And so just briefly, and I want to get to Judge Thompson and Judge Powers after you, Justice Earls, but you alluded to a huge decision, I guess it was last week, on the funding of the Leandro case. and you had a powerful dissent. Can you help us understand what this ruling means in real terms for students, teachers, and parents, particularly those in rural and under-resourced school districts?
Right. What this ruling meant is that the funds that were designated in what's been called the Leandro Plan, the plan that an expert a consultant group appointed by a trial court had come up with what is so understand there had been a legal finding that in parts of the state children were not getting access to a sound basic education. And so there was a court order at the trial court level that millions of dollars needed to be spent. And as I've been campaigning around the state, I can tell you that school board members and sometimes teachers, voters, parents, people know to the dollar what their county would have received under the Leandro plan. And that money, the court order requiring those funds to be spent is no longer in effect, and our court ended the case. But what they didn't end was the right to a sound basic education. That is still in the state constitution. And if you follow the logic of the majority, where they said the problem was that the plaintiffs just didn't include in their complaint the right language to show what they were actually challenging. If you take that at face value, I understand, and now I'm just reporting on what I know from public sources, from the news media, that education advocates around the state are looking at, what avenues remain to enforce that right. And what I would say is that so let me also respond to what you've probably heard on the media. A lot of the media coverage about the case has said that the court decided that education policy should be left to the legislature. Now, there was language in the majority suggesting that, justifying their decision on those grounds, but that's not the basis for the decision. That was sort of commentary in the opinion. And what I would argue, and what a prior court decided in the same case, the 2022 court of the Supreme Court, at which time there were 4 Democrats and 3 Republicans, in the Leandro case, that court said, yes, we should defer to the legislature to remedy constitutional harms. But the time for deference is over. It's been, at that point, it had been almost 30 years. And the legislature had just continued to fail to adequately fund public education. And so that's why in 2022, the court ordered that those funds be spent. And I think a helpful analogy to understanding my position in my dissent, and this is sort of paraphrasing what I put in the dissent, but when other constitutional rights are at stake, our court has had no problem ordering the state to pay money to vindicate those rights. So a good example are the MAP Act cases. The MAP Act was a statute that the General Assembly passed that allowed the Department of Transportation to indicate where it was going to build roads. And if your house was in one of those corridors where they said, oh, we're going to build a highway here, the minute they designated that, nobody wanted to buy your house, right? Because your house was going to be subject to eminent domain by the government. And so property owners came to the court and said, the state has taken away our property rights and we should be compensated. And our court agreed with them. And we ordered that, and ultimately it was millions of dollars that was spent to compensate property owners for the right to, maintain their properties. And I agree with that I wrote one of the opinions for the majority in one of those cases. My point is, if we're going to protect property rights by ordering the state to pay money to people who were injured, I think we should similarly protect the right to our children's right to an education, and that the court has the power to order the state to spend money to meet that constitutional standard. So this is not
100%.
a question. This is not a question of policy. This is a question of rights, and whether our court will step up to the plate and carry out its constitutional duty to uphold the state constitution.
Thank you so much. And I mean, if we don't care about our children receiving a fair and just education per the North Carolina Constitution, but property over people, right? Property over children.
Well, and let me
And
just,
and
well, sorry.
I'm going to have to go to another quick question, but if you have one more thing to add, go ahead, Justice Earls.
Well, I just want people to understand that it's not simply in the first article where it says that the people have the right to the privilege of education and the state shall guard and maintain that right. That is the language, the state. So it doesn't say the legislature, the executive, the courts. It says the state shall guard and maintain that right. And then there's an entire article of the state constitution entitled Education. And it lays out all the things the state is supposed to be doing to guarantee. And in that title, the language is a uniform system of public education. So that's what the state constitution guarantees. And there has not been a constitutional amendment to eliminate those provisions.
And as we move to Judge Thompson, this case is also very near and dear to New Rural Project because the original filers of that Leandro case came from Hope County, one of our 7 focus counties. And
Well,
go ahead, Judge Thompson, if you want to
I
have
was
a
just going to
follow-up.
say, all that I've heard from Justice Earls, and I really want people to pick up on the words that she's using, because language and words mean a lot on the judicial side. Who is interpreting words like sound? Who's interpreting words like privilege versus right? Who's considering adequate? Who determines what adequate looks like when it comes to funding? And that's why it's important to know who your judges are, know who the justices are when determining such important cases such as that. And just listening to her explain the ruling and how the dissent impact or how the dissent will be read in the public, pay attention to the fact that words matter. And folks sitting on the bench may look at it through a different lens than the legislative branch, but guess who's interpreting it? Whoever's sitting and holding the power of the pen and the gavel, how that's looked at is so important in what Justice Earls was explaining to us.
No, thank you. And so as folks, go to the polls in November, right? I think Caroline already said there's going to be a Supreme Court race on the ballot, 3 Court of Appeals races on the ballot. And so some folks have to fill in bubbles, flip that paper over and go to the end. It is so critical. So Judge Thompson, as we talked about, you went from district court, superior court, and then on the appellate court. How did your perspective change as you changed courts? Or what surprised you the most about how judicial decisions work their way up through the system?
Can I tell you what didn't change? That is that folks just simply want to be heard, want to be understood, their position. They want a fair shot at it. They want an even playing field. They want someone who's going to look at a file and not look at it through the lenses of Democrat versus Republican. They want their day in court. One of the things that I learned along the way is the higher you go up in the judicial system, the less folks know about the court, because it's, being traveling 100 counties, explaining the importance of the higher courts. It's a task because some people say, I don't go to court. I don't have to go to court. I don't know anybody in court. I don't get in trouble. But yet there was a time, especially in the civil rights era, when we could run into the court knowing that that was going to be our safe haven to bring justice to our issues and to our concerns. And now fast forward, when it's an option almost for folks to decide to vote instead of the urgency of now to vote, we're having to convince. There's no reason that Justice Earl should have to run herself ragged all over this state to explain why she's been the trooper. She's been the founder of changing and flipping our courts to fairness in her seasoned time. But that's where we are. Folks are still not engaged. So that part, that perspective of, wow, after all of the work of climbing for justice and making sure that everyone has a fair shot when they walk into the courtroom, we're still having to convince people that courts matter. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's also, almost by design that all of this is kind of a little bit complicated for the regular person. But I think, talking about our, making decisions about our children, making decisions
Mhm.
about our utility costs. I bet everybody can, everyone can understand that. And so that's what we want to, think about when you make your choice in November for all of these judicial races.
Mhm.
And Judge Powers, if you could, can you say anything? I know you're in rural Robertson County,
Yeah.
but you travel across a region. So maybe tell us a little bit more about like how does Superior Court work and how many counties are you represent? I believe you're in another county right now. And how might your rulings affect rural counties and access to housing, schools, or public services from a Superior Court perspective?
So first, Robeson County is one of the Leandro counties. So,
Yes, that too.
but I am a Superior Court judge, and by Constitution, we travel. So ideally, I'm home for 6 months, and then I'm in another county for 6 months. But actually, since July of last year, I have been out of county. So in the fall, I was in Onslow, Jones, Duplin, and Sampson counties, and held court there. And so it's kind of running a different circuit. When you hold court in a multi-county district, you're assigned to whichever court they assign you to. So I might hold court in Duplin County this week. Next week I might be in Clinton and Sampson County, and then I might be in Jacksonville for 2 weeks, doing a murder trial or something of that nature. The different courthouses work differently. Not only do people have different expectations when they come to court, some courts in some districts are very litigious. You come down, because I'm in Wilmington right now. So Wilmington is a 2-county district, and you have Pender County and you have New Hanover County. So it's a very robust litigation when it comes to civil matters here in Wilmington, and kind of like that in Pender, but not as much. So if you're going to Brunswick County, which I also held court in, you're going to have a heavy civil calendar. I come from a civil and criminal background, but more criminal as far as Superior Court is concerned than civil. So there are a lot of people who are affected by what happens in Superior Court. Right now, when you're talking about the way that the roads are going, they're widening 95. So that means that people are going into court and asking to be fairly compensated for the eminent domain that has taken parts of their lands to make 95 wider or to make a traffic circle. Those things have real world impacts on these people. There was a business, and basically the business ended up dying because it was shut off from the road. It was difficult for people to access the business, and so they went out of business. So those people are impacted. The people that own the business, the people that work at the business, the people that would have frequented the business, but for what was going on with the construction. And then when you have people who are out here, committing crimes and making people unsafe, whether they be violent crimes or crimes of theft. When people are charged with a crime, more than likely they're going to get a bond. If it's a capital case, maybe not. If it's some serious felony, they might not get a bond that they can realistically make. But after a period of time, people's bonds get lowered and they're out. And so people are like, why are these people out in the street and they're charged with? It's because people are presumed innocent until they're proven guilty. You might know he's a thief, but until he has his day in court, that person or she has the right at least to have a reasonable bond under our Constitution. And if they're out on that reasonable bond, that person may get charged with another offense. So then you have this person walking around, and their case may be a year old or a year and a half old, because it does take a while for cases to make their way up to Superior Court. And the general public is like, why is this menace to society out here wreaking havoc? But it's our system of jurisprudence. You have to have your day in court, and then once that person is convicted, then we're under the Structured Sentencing Act. So a person has a prior record level, meaning each person that is convicted of an offense is not sentenced in the same way. So if that person has a low offender level, like they're level one, or have no prior criminal history, they could commit the same offense as someone who's a level six, but they're going to be handled differently. Somebody might be eligible for probation or even a sentence of a fine and unsupervised probation. And then another person may be looking at going to prison for up to 39 months based on where they fall on that on the chart. And then the different offenses have different levels. And we go from class I up to A, which is murder. And so you look at those levels and you find them on the and then you're in the box. And so when you're in that little grid, there's a presumptive range, the range where the mitigators and the aggravators are not really a factor. You just send them in the presumptive range. But if there are some mitigating factors, some things like under duress, or the person has a good character in the community up to now, supports their family, or aggravating factors, it involved a child, or took advantage of someone elderly for pecuniary gain. Those are aggravating factors, and then you can move up and down in that box. But a judge is basically constrained to the grid as to where that person falls. So there was a case where a young lady was charged with felony hit and run. That's all she was charged with. Well, a person ended up dying based on that hit and run. But she wasn't charged with murder. She wasn't charged with death by motor vehicle. She was just charged with felony hit and run. So the judge can only sentence on what the person is charged with. Mm-hmm. And that people have to understand about our system of jurisprudence.
No, that's a great example that, folks are probably outraged about what actually happened, but they weren't charged for, something a little more serious that might have carried some additional, jail time, etc. So now one of the things we also want to be careful, because we know Justice Earls and Judge Powers, you all are currently sitting, judges. So we want to make sure that the questions we ask you also honors, that role that you all currently hold. There are a couple questions in the chat. And I know Nancy and John have asked a couple questions. So, and I'm not sure if you can answer this one, Justice Earl, because it's probably something that you may see, but if there anyone else, maybe Judge Thompson, there's a question around federal or state National Guard being at polling places. Is that, if this is, while it's supposedly illegal to have them present? That's what's something that came from Nancy and John. What would be necessary to bring a case before the courts regards to that?
Well, so what I did type in a quick answer to that, and from my experience as a civil rights attorney, what I can tell you, when I was at the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, we issued guidance to all of the U.S. attorneys in every district across the country with what the federal law says about that issue, and so not only did the Civil Rights Division send observers to places where we thought there might be issues of any type. But we also were in a position to call, any U.S. Attorney's Office. What I can tell you what happened in the past, and this was a while ago, but someone would call and say, "There's a law enforcement vehicle at the entrance to my polling place, and I see people turning away and not trying to vote because for whatever reasons, like who knows, you see a car turn around and leave, you don't know why they're doing it, but that was being observed." And we would call the U.S. Attorney's Office and say, "Would you please contact usually would start by contacting the County Board of Elections, but, would you find out what's going on and correct the situation?" I don't know what the current policy of the current U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division is, but what I do know, again, from public materials, is that the North Carolina Attorney General, Jeff Jackson, has made clear that his office is committed to ensuring that we have free and fair elections in North Carolina in 2026. And so I think concerns about that happening. So I actually think there's three places you could go. You could call the U.S. Attorney, you could call the Attorney General's office. You could call, there are nonpartisan voter protection hotlines. I
Mhm.
think the nonpartisan group is 1-888 Our Vote. So you can call that number on election day if you see a problem, and they will try to troubleshoot and correct it. And because you don't, if you just see a law enforcement vehicle, you don't know. I mean, maybe someone needed assistance of some type. You don't know what's going on. But the 1-888 Our Vote number could be helpful. And then political parties also have election day, election protection boiler rooms. So people ready to answer phone calls. So you could call. I don't, I actually, I should say, I only know what the Democratic Party does. I don't know what the Republican Party does. I assume they do election protection, but I do know you could call the North Carolina Democratic Party and say, here's what I'm observing. Can you do something about this? So I think there are a lot of options to try to address something when it happens on election day. If there's some reason to, if you learn of some reason to believe in advance of election day that something like that might happen, I think that again, you should take proactive steps to uh, contact one of the right now today. You can call 1-888 Our Vote. You won't get a real person, but there's an answering machine and they'll get back to you. So there are a lot of volunteers out there ready to protect the right to vote.
And I will say I've actually used 1-888 Our Vote myself when the first year they started doing voter ID. You need requiring IDs to vote in 2023, and I saw someone get turned away, and they weren't offered the opportunity to vote provisional or to say what they may have a special circumstance, and so they take that information and they are getting it regardless of party. There was one question in the chat about how do judges avoid looking partisan when issuing decisions when they typically, I guess, when we typically have to pick a party to get on the ballot? And I know I see Judge Thompson, that was one that balls her up. She talked about it earlier. And I believe we've got some good pro-democracy, pro-constitution judges in front of us. But Judge Thompson, would you want to do you want to take that one?
Well, it just makes the question made me think about how many times I've made issue a ruling about families hurting children broken from relationships, and children in DSS court, and their parents not able to take care of them, or kids caught up in the pipeline of justice because of something that happened at school, and all of a sudden a juvenile petition is filed again. None of that had to do anything with my political affiliation. I don't walk around carrying a D in my purse or on my ink pen when in drawing orders. Folks have issues. They're not just file numbers. They are folks looking for answers, with people given the authority by the judicial system. So I don't know how to not look or how to look. I just know that justice has a face of its own, and you know it when you see it. And when you read the ruling that, was fair and an outcome based upon what's presented to you, and not what the parties wanted you to do in that situation. For example, I think about the ruling on the Court of Appeals, and it was involving the school system, public funds versus private schools, and the media wanted to make it about, oh, well, she was a Democrat, and so that's why she, ruled in that way, and um, people associated with the party affiliation for Republicans, wrote a certain amicus brief about, because of the political weight of saying, hey, if you don't want your kid to go to this private school that's teaching about the I can't breathe and all of that,
George,
then thank
George
you.
Floyd.
Then you're right. I was going to say
Mhm.
George Foreman, but that's because I'm hungry. But but they wanted to make it about politics. It's like, no, it was a straight contractual law issue. If you don't want your children going to this school anymore, then you vote with your feet, and you get your kids out of that system, just like you paid a contract for a contract there, take them somewhere else. It wasn't about being a Democrat or a Republican. So, you know, people want to, because of the grand notion that somehow if you put a party affiliation behind a judge's name, that you know who they are. we all have our value systems. We all have what we believe in and on a personal level. But when you zip up that black robe and you're sitting on a bench, you are there for the people and not for your party.
I love it. There for the people and not for the party.
Mhm.
So I definitely appreciate that response. Um, and I know, we have elections coming up this year. Can one of you or all of you take a stab at, explaining to us why is it important for voters to pay close attention to judicial elections for their future and the future of North Carolina, even though these important races don't necessarily receive the same attention as other races? So give me about 1 minute or so each person. Like, why is it so important that we focus on those races? In particular right now, because I think if we watch the news, we've seen the cases being ruled on at the US Supreme Court level. And so I think folks really understand a little bit better, I hope, how these judge decisions can impact all of our lives.
People
So
need
Judge
to
Powers, go
yes,
ahead.
people need to pay attention to the judicial races. They need to see who is running, where they come from, what their background is, and to figure out how that person may rule in just overall. Because just seeing someone's name and they have a D beside it or an R beside it, does not give you a whole lot of perspective. But back during the civil rights movement, whenever we knew that we could go into court and that there was going to be a champion for justice there, it's not that way anymore. Now you need to make sure that the people that you vote for are people who have a voice that reflect your value system, that reflect what you feel needs to go on in this country. Because just a D or an R beside your name, there was a time when judges just ran unaffiliated, and that wasn't an issue. Now people are having to claim a party, and other folks think, well, if they're part of that party, then they're going to rule in this way, or if they're part of that party, they're going to rule in that way. You need to know for yourself what these people are about and what they represent, and then mark your ballot. Make sure you go there and take 2 more with you.
I love it. We're going to vote triply and you vote, bring 2 more. It's not enough that you vote yourself. You've got to bring a friend, bring a family member. Judge Thompson, do you want to add anything about why you think it's so important for voters to pay close attention to judicial elections?
Well, not just pay attention, but support. It's difficult when you are on the ballot and you've got the top tier candidates like the president, the governor. Everybody wants to focus on the top of the ticket, but really the firewall is the judicial system. Otherwise, we're going to have one branch of government if we don't wake up and realize that judges have been the firewall for what's been happening in the other branches of government. So financially support your candidates who are running for judicial office because they get the trickle down money. They get the candy money that's left in the corner of the pocket or somewhere in the seat of the car. When the top ticket candidates, when you call and ask, oh, I've already given to the governor's race. I already gave it to the. No, I'm going to say it for Justice Earls because she can't say it right now. She needs your help. She needs your vote, but she also needs your dollar bill. She needs to be able to be competitive because I'm telling you, by the time the ads start to run, if you don't have the money to respond, then the last voice they heard, the loudest mic, will win. And she needs your support, not just your vote, but she needs your support. So that one's on me. I'll take that one.
Oh, and I feel you. It's this is a nonpartisan space, but I ran what 5, 6 years ago, and a lot of folks would say I gave money to this person and that person at the top of the ticket, and I ultimately started to say, well, that money's not going to put flyers into the mailboxes of my potential voters and supporters. And I actually was just on Facebook explaining to folks today how important the judicial races are when they were only thinking about the other federal race that's on the ticket. So I think that's a great point that, and there's 3 co-equal branches of government, y'all. No matter what you see in the news, there's executive, judicial, and the congressional. There are 3 co-equal branches at the state level and the federal level. And this level of government is so, so important. Anything else you would like to add about why it's so important, Justice Earls?
Well, yes, what I would say is that I really believe that in this time where federal courts are not as open to the claims of certainly as a civil rights attorney, the clients and communities that I worked with and that I represented, our state courts really matter a lot. And the only way, I say this a lot on the when talking to voters. If you're concerned about partisan gerrymandering, and I think a lot of people believe that our system should be fair. And in 2022, our court ruled that partisan gerrymandering violates your rights under the state constitution, and it was a nonpartisan ruling. It doesn't matter which party does it. We gave neutral tests that 4 or 5 measures of gerrymandering that the legislature could use to determine whether their plans were fair or not. And and so if you believe that our political system should be fair and that who's elected should fairly represent our voting patterns in the state, and I think, that again, that's a nonpartisan principle. The only way to get there in North Carolina is through the courts. We do not have citizen referenda or a way to put a constitutional amendment on the ballot, similar to, say, California or Florida or other states that have tried to curb gerrymandering that way. The only way to curb that in North Carolina is through the courts. And so if you care about protecting our democracy in the state, if you're frustrated because you think that you've been voting and you don't have a fair voice, well, actually, that's probably true because of the way the districts are drawn in this state. And that by districts, I mean our congressional districts and our state house and state senate districts. So that's why the courts matter so much, not only for this state, but actually for the country. People should understand that when our courts made that ruling, the districts have to be fair, the legislature, under court order, had to redraw. North Carolina sent 7 Democrats and 7 Republicans to Congress. But then the new court came in and in the same case reversed and said, no, courts have no power to tell the legislature how to draw districts, and the legislature redrew. And in 2024, we sent 10 Republicans and 4 Democrats, and that's just not reflective of the purple state that we're in. So, and if we still had that 7-7 delegation right now today, the House of Representatives would be in control of Democrats. There would be more of checks and balances at the national level. So for people who believe that we have 3 branches of government so that they can balance each other out in terms of the powers that they have and what they do in governing, then I think they have to appreciate how North Carolina's Supreme Court elections really matter a lot. And the other thing that I want to say to folks is don't underestimate your power as an influencer. Right? You may not be on social media necessarily, but there's people you can text. There are people who you get together with, whether it's at the barber shop or your book club or your church group or wherever. You are part of a community. And now that you've been on this Zoom, you are a highly informed voter, without a doubt. So many people don't know my name, Anita Earls. They don't know our court, what it does, why it matters. You can spread the word, and that is people who know you will trust you, right? So don't be shy about using your power simply to spread the word and talk to folks about what you care about and why they should care about it.
Thank you, Jester. And that's one of the things when folks say, well, what can we do? I tell everyone, no matter what the space is, you're sitting in a Zoom at 7:40 on a Monday night, April 13th. You know right now more than anyone else about the judges and about this court case, whether it's the executive at your company, the CEO, a physician, a janitor. You know more than all of those people. And so your job after this is go tell others, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, tell your sorors, your fraternity brothers, your church members, what you learned tonight. Mm-hmm. And that's how we're going to make sure folks engage in this democracy. And so I think we're almost out of time. Judge Powers or Judge Thompson, Do you have anything you'd like to add about how community members can stay engaged and hold the system accountable beyond Election Day?
Oh, I'm a big believer in calling your congressman. So I will call my congressman, which I used to call. I mean, now it's Mark Harris. So, but I used to call more frequently when it was someone who was like Mike McIntyre. But I call my state representatives. I call my state legislators, and and they're receptive. And I'm from Robertson County. Both of them are Republican, but I've got their numbers. They listen to me. Sometimes I'm fussing about what they did. It might not make a bit of difference, but they know that they're gonna hear from me. And you don't have to be me to call your legislators, because they have offices and they have staff, and they will listen and they will respond because you're their constituent. So you have that power as just a regular person. I started that a long time ago before I ever took the bench, because I have opinions, and I think that people should represent me in the way that I deserve to be represented. And if they don't, I'm going to let them know.
All right. Anything else, Judge Thompson? And then we're going to turn it over to Ms. Sumter.
I think the power of social media has gone over some of the older, like those of us who are over 50, but please use that as your soapbox also to call them out, because apparently that's where news is really happening for the young folks now. They're not reading newspapers. They're not looking at websites. Get out there and put them on blast.
Right. And I think, just sir, you said it a couple days ago, everybody has one of these. Text your people.
Yeah.
Everybody has a text group, right? We've got group chats of all sorts. I probably have 5 going right now while I'm on this call. WhatsApp, whatever those ways that you are having conversations with folks, and particularly our
Yeah.
younger folks as well. And so we've got to make sure that everyone understands the importance of 2026. And look, let's just take I think everybody heard the numbers at the beginning. 401 votes decided the 2020 Chief Justice race in North Carolina out of 5 million votes cast. And Justice Earls, one of the things I've learned tonight, right? So I'm taking notes, I'm learning just like everyone else, is that Chief Justice decides a lot of what cases are heard. That is an extremely important seat. And it was decided by 401 votes. 2024, fast forward 4 years, that race was decided by 734 votes. And Justice Riggs still has her seat, but her opponent drug that out over 6 months, trying to toss 60,000 votes. And I believe Justice Earls also said that 4 members that are currently sitting on the Supreme Court voted to allow those votes to be tossed. So those are the things we have to think about when we go into the ballot and decide who is going to support us, who cares about our voting rights, who cares about our children. Think about those things as we make those decisions on in November. And early voting starts, I believe it's October 15th, but my team can correct me if I'm wrong. So we've got some time, but we've got to get the word out today, which is why we didn't want to wait. We're not waiting until September to start talking about the judges. We started talking about the judges all back in October. So we're going to keep talking about the judges every single day between now and Election Day. And if you're in any part of the New World Project focus area and you follow us in any capacity, you're going to hear about these judges. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carolyn Sumter. But thank you all. Everybody, please give a round of applause for these amazing women, judges, the folks who are out here fighting the good fight and making sure that they are making decisions fairly and following the Constitution. They were here tonight with us, y'all. Ms. Sumter?
Thank you.
All right. So again, thank you, Cynthia, our moderator. And again, thank you, Justice Earls, Judge Thompson, and Judge Powers. As we close tonight's conversation, I want to leave you with this. The judiciary plays a critical role in our democracy. The decisions made in courtrooms across North Carolina, from local district courts to the North Carolina Supreme Court, have real and lasting impacts on our communities, our schools, and our rights. And here is the key takeaway. You have a voice in shaping that system. This year, midterm elections are an opportunity for each of us to stay informed, do our research, and show up to vote, not alone, but bring someone else with you. Because who we elect as judges matters. Now, I would ask that you join us for upcoming events and opportunities to stay engaged with New World Project. And you don't necessarily have to be in our focus counties to do that, but join us for upcoming events. Text and phone banking efforts will be kicking off soon. There are plenty of ways to plug in and make an impact. Our call to action, one of the first things that we will be doing, April 21st. I'm sorry, yes, April 21st is our call to action. We're joining other folks in this space for advocacy on North Carolina public education in Raleigh. So join us, join Red Wine Blue and the Pastors Coalition. Other groups will be at the General Assembly. So this is just one way that you can stay engaged. And thank you, Justice Earls, for your interpretation and breaking down in layman's terms what many of us had questions about on this Leandra case. Also, some other events that we will take place in our focus counties. Anson County, we're excited to announce that we're coming to Anson County. We can't wait to chop it up and spill the tea this May as we launch our new Curls and Fade reboot series. So come out, get involved, and be a part of this movement. Also, we will have phone banking opportunities with NRP in May and June. So you'll be hearing some from our organizing director, Nisi, and her team about how we can phone bank, text bank, and make sure folks are ready to vote and understand what will be on their ballot. Excuse me. And next, who doesn't love a great party? Join us for our virtual fundraiser, April 29th. Get your tickets now. You don't want to miss that. Cynthia, is it okay if I announce who our special guest will be?
I was coming off mute to do it, but you got it. And his name came up a bit today. So
it did. Absolutely.
You'll be the first to know. Go ahead, Carolyn.
All right. So first to know, hot off the press, we are pleased to announce that Attorney General Jeff Jackson will be our special guest at our virtual fundraiser. Tickets are very reasonable. You can click on the link. We'll also drop it in the chat, and it'll be on all of our socials as well as you'll receive emails. So come join. Who doesn't love a good party? All right. And again, don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. All right. Follow us. And if you're not receiving regular communication, and I'll just be the first to say, we do not send out tons of emails, but when we do send them, it's of great importance and has great value. Join our mailing list at newworldproject.org. All right. And so I would be remiss if we did not talk about funds. So your support helps us host events like Urgent Conversations to reach underserved communities and ensure more residents have access to information and resources they need to fully participate in our democracy. To give you a sense of an impact, $25 will help us provide outreach materials to community members. $50 supports a community engagement event, and a $100 donation helps us expand our programming into rural counties. So you can give right now by scanning the QR code on your screen or using the link that I'm hoping a team member will drop in the chat. All right. So every gift, no matter the amount, moves this work forward. And again, I want to say thank you again to our panelists. I also want to say a special thank you to our team at New World Project. No one on our team works alone. So a special shout out and thanks to all team members. I think all of our team was present today in some way, shape, form, or fashion for this Urgent Conversations. And from P&P, we want to say thank you, team members. And thank you again to our panelists for sharing your time and expertise. And thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. Let's continue to stay engaged, informed, and committed to strengthening our communities. To our attendees, when was the last time that you can share and brag that you had 3 judges in your living room and chopping it up with conversation? All right. We had a great time tonight. All right. So I am also sharing our senior leadership contact information. If there's anything that NRP can assist you with, please feel free to contact Cynthia Wallace, our executive director, at cynthia@newrulproject.org. You can contact me, policy and programs, Caroline at newrulproject.org, or Nisi, our organizing director at quanicia@newrulproject.org. And on behalf of NRP Board of Directors, our executive director, team members, and the communities that we serve across these 7 counties, thank you. Please give us a thumbs up on the Mobilize when they ask for your feedback. And also, if there are any suggestions that you would like to offer or any future topics that you would like for us to discuss, please share that. Thank you. We ended a little early. Again, Justice Earls, we hope to see you again pretty soon. Judge Thompson, as well as Judge Powers. Thank you to everyone that joined tonight. I know we had a few board members that were online tonight. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And we're going to give you a few minutes back. Text someone, let them know about what you heard, what you saw, what you feel, and information that you can share. And remember, don't forget about the judges. Have a good night.